The studio lights were bright, the tone casual at first, and then the air changed in a second. Don Lemon leaned back, smirked just enough for the cameras to catch it, and dropped one single word at Jasmine Crockett. Junior. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a slip. It was a label meant to shrink her in front of everyone watching. You could almost hear the audience pause, that quick intake when something isn't quite right. The word carried more than sarcasm. It carried dismissal. In that moment, Crockett didn't flinch. She blinked once, leaned in, and started gathering her words. Viewers could sense it. A storm was building behind her calm, and right here, before the full showdown unfolds, I'll say this. Tap the like button and subscribe now. You don't want to miss these political face-offs, because moments like the one you're about to see can flip an entire narrative. The scene was set. A seasoned anchor, relying on arrogance, and a younger congresswoman sitting across from him, holding files, memory, and patience. One held status, the other held receipts. The word hung in the air, Junior, building pressure in the room. Anyone watching expected Crockett to brush it off or laugh politely. They were wrong. What came out of her next didn't just defend her name. It shifted the energy in the room. It reminded everyone watching what happens when arrogance meets preparation. And the look on Lemon's face, that told the whole story before he even tried to recover. Moments like this don't just live in a studio. They echo, because what's at stake is bigger than a single insult. When Don Lemon dropped that word, he wasn't just talking down to one person. He was tapping something older, the way younger voices are brushed off, the way women in public life are told to wait their turn, the way authority gets used as a weapon. For Jasmine Crockett, this wasn't her first encounter with that tone. But here it hit harder because millions were watching. It became a test of what kind of politics people want to see. Arrogance covered by experience, or sharp clarity delivered without apology. That single word raised questions. How often do institutions expect fresh voices to shrink? How often do media figures assume they control the frame? This wasn't just about two people clashing. It was about status colliding with change, and the irony was clear. Lemon may have believed the word junior would reduce Crockett. What it did instead was make the contrast sharper. He carried the weight of past controversies, a career full of moments where his presence overshadowed the story. She carried something else. Notes, facts, cases, the kind of preparation that can swing an entire debate once the floor is hers. The stakes here were not only personal dignity, they were generational and cultural. When viewers saw that exchange, many recognized the dynamic instantly. It wasn't just him versus her. It was the old know your place meeting the new I've earned mine. And that frame matters, because debates aren't just about who talks louder. They're about what flows out afterward. Highlights, clips, sound bites, messages shared on phones across the country. They shape what people believe is possible. Crockett understood that what she did next would not only answer an insult, it might plant a new standard. She could let it slide, proving his point, or she could confront it head-on, showing that dignity and readiness outweigh condescension. Nobody in that room expected what was coming, and when it did, the balance shifted fast. The question became, how far could one calm, pointed response reach once the cameras caught it? Don Lemon didn't end up at that desk by accident. Over the years, he carved out a place as one of the most recognized anchors on cable news. Sharp suits, direct delivery, and a kind of confidence that bordered on swagger. He was known for pushing into controversial territory, for speaking bluntly, and for rarely letting a guest's words pass without challenge. But that same directness often crossed into dismissal. Critics called him arrogant. Colleagues whispered about tense moments off camera. Viewers could recall a string of incidents where his tone seemed less about asking questions and more about proving he already held the answers. That edge became part of his reputation. Love him or hate him, Don Lemon was never one to soften. Still, the cracks showed. There were on-air exchanges where his interruptions drowned out guests who were visibly frustrated. There were segments where the focus shifted from the issues at hand to his choice of phrasing. He was no stranger to headlines that painted him as condescending, abrasive, even disrespectful. When the word junior slipped out that night toward Jasmine Crockett, it didn't feel like an isolated jab. It felt like another piece in a pattern. Behind the stage lights, his career had already weathered debates about his temperament. Former staff hinted he could be difficult. Commentators questioned whether his ego sometimes overshadowed the work. None of this erased his accomplishments, his longevity in the industry, his ability to command a broadcast, but it painted him as a figure marked by contradiction. Sharp journalist, yes, but also a man whose unchecked confidence made him vulnerable to moments like this one. And arrogance in political infotainment is a dangerous look. The audience has no patience for it when it feels unfair. Everyone's experienced being talked down to. Everyone knows what it feels like to be underestimated. So when Lemon used that word, millions projected their own experiences through the screen. It wasn't just Crockett being minimized. It was anyone who's ever been waved off, dismissed, or told, "Know your place." That's what made the insult. More than a slip, it was a symbol. By the time it echoed online, it wasn't Don Lemon anchoring a show. It was Don Lemon embodying entitlement in real time. The villain role wrote itself, and villains always underestimate one thing: preparation. Lemon leaned into comfort, assuming his seniority gave him a permanent edge. He didn't see that Crockett had spent her career walking into rooms where people doubted her, rooms where she had no choice but to argue with precision. That night he pulled the trigger on a word he thought would sting lightly. Instead, it set the stage for his undoing. Jasmine Crockett doesn't carry herself like someone waiting for permission. Long before she set foot in Congress, she carried herself with an energy that said, "I belong here and I've worked for it." Her roots tell the story. Born and raised in Dallas, Crockett was no stranger to watching communities get overlooked. That sense of imbalance, who gets represented, who gets dismissed, followed her into school. It pushed her to study harder, speak up sooner. She didn't inherit connections that opened doors. She created them through persistence. Law school became the next step. While others were drawn to safe corporate tracks, Crockett leaned toward public defense. That choice wasn't glamorous. It meant late nights at county jails, paperwork stacked high, clients who felt like the system was designed to forget them. She chose those cases because she understood what being underestimated looked like. The courtroom became her training ground, each trial sharpening her ability to stay calm while others tried to rattle her. Crockett's name started moving beyond Dallas when she challenged police misconduct and voter limitations. Prosecutors and judges noticed her composure. She developed a reputation, the young attorney who came prepared, receipts in hand, unwilling to be bullied out of an argument. That reputation followed her into state politics, then into Congress. Her seat wasn't inherited. She had to fight for it. Along the way, detractors pointed to her age, her gender, her willingness to speak plainly. Instead of softening, she leaned into it. Supporters saw authenticity. Critics saw defiance. Either way, she grew harder to ignore. Behind the scenes, Crockett carried scars most viewers would never see. Every courtroom where an older lawyer chuckled at her youth. Every hallway where colleagues second-guessed her knowledge. Every panel show where anchors treated her like a side note. All those cuts added up, but they also prepared her. So when Don Lemon tried to shrink her with Junior, Crockett wasn't startled. She'd been there before. The difference now was the audience. Millions of people were watching, and many of them had carried the same weight in their lives. Overlooked at jobs, talked over in meetings, told to wait their turn. Crockett knew that if she held her ground here, she wasn't just defending herself. She was representing everyone in her shoes. That night, she brought files and facts not as props, but as shields and weapons. Years of defending clients, correcting, the record fighting uphill. Those tools were second nature to her. She didn't need to match his arrogance with outrage. Her silence, her notes, and her patience were all she needed to flip the script. The stage was set for the clash, one side leaning on hierarchy, the other standing on hard-earned preparation. Crockett wasn't just ready for the word junior. She had been rehearsing her entire life for moments like this. The exchange unfolded the way small fires turn into blazes, not in a flash, but through steady sparks. After calling her junior, Don Lemon kept pressing. His voice carried that tone of practiced authority, as if his years on air granted him ownership of the stage. Every follow-up came quick, layered with smug pauses, so the spotlight stayed on him. Crockett, though, didn't rush. She kept her eyes steady, responding in measured tones that underlined a fact. She wasn't rattled. While he barreled forward, she let silences land, reminding everyone that she was still in control of her own voice. Each calm reply acted less like defense and more like bait, drawing him further into arrogance. The pattern hardened. Lemon cut her off midpoint, then circled back to repeat his earlier jab. He inserted subtle laughs, as though to suggest she wasn't serious. The viewers at home, though, noticed what he missed. She wasn't losing her ground, she was calculating. Like a chess game, each pause, each small nod, each controlled answer positioned her for the next move. The split screen said it all. On one side, an anchor barking questions, riding momentum, assuming the moment belonged to him. On the other, a congresswoman quietly thumbing through her notes, unhurried, her confidence growing as he unraveled. It's here that something subtle shifted. Viewers could sense the energy turning. Crockett looked less like someone defending herself and more like someone about to spring a trap. Her stillness became suspense. Lemon kept missing it, too focused on dominating to notice he was walking into a setup. By now the word junior wasn't floating in memory. It was echoing. Every attempt at humiliation only sharpened the edge of what Crockett was holding back. Even the studio crew seemed to catch it. The tension hung heavier, like everyone waiting for a string to snap. And still Crockett waited. Her restraint was its own weapon, because the longer she let him lecture, the more monumental her reply would feel. The cameras stayed tight on her face, her quiet smile hinting she knew exactly where this was going. When she finally leaned forward, it wasn't with anger. It was with precision. And from that moment, the debate stopped being his show. What she said next didn't just answer the insult. It shattered the frame he built. When Jasmine Crockett finally leaned in, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't match Don Lemon's volume or fall into his rhythm. She spoke evenly, flipping through her notes, landing her first line like someone striking the edge of a match. Junior, you say? Let's check the record. That one phrase stung, more than any raised tone ever could. Her emphasis wasn't angry. It was steady, like a lawyer walking a jury step by step. She unfolded her preparations slowly, so that the weight of each point hit before the next one arrived. The first receipt came in the form of dates, legislation she had sponsored, and arguments she had led. She reminded the audience that while Lehman sat in a studio, she stood daily on the chamber floor carrying legal arguments born from years defending clients. Each detail landed like a document being stamped. Official, undeniable. Lemon tried to interject, but Crockett barely blinked. She raised her hand toward him gently, as if marking his interruption as evidence for her case. The room noticed. The more he pressed, the clearer it looked. He was losing even as he fought. Then came the second receipt. Crockett flipped back further, telling stories of her work as a public defender. She spoke of real people, names changed for privacy, but stories intact. A teenager facing charges, a working mother threatened with eviction, clients no one expected to win. Against systems stacked against them, she had walked in with nothing but files and fought until the record said otherwise. The audience heard echoes of those fights in her voice. Now the word junior sounded absurd. This was not a rookie, improvising her way through a soundbite. This was someone carrying years of practice, stepping into yet another trial. Only this time, the trial was live on air. Crockett leaned back, letting each silence crystallize. For every jab Lemon had, delivered she returned a fact. For every smirk, a citation. And the beauty was in the calm, no shouting, no anger. Just preparation doing the talking. The third receipt was more direct. She drew from her record in Congress, citing votes and committee hearings where she had pressed issues that people cared about. Her delivery was surgical, turning what Lemon intended as dismissal into a showcase of experience. Viewers watching at home could feel the tilt. The establishment anchor suddenly looked like the unprepared one. Again, Lemon tried to cut in. This time, Crockett paused mid-page, turned slowly and gave him a look that didn't need words. It was the kind of look that says, "You've already lost, and you know it." The silence that followed was louder than any retort. The audience knew who had the upper hand. It wasn't just her words that landed. It was how she carried them. Every pause gave space for the viewers to catch up and process. Here's what he said. Here's what she proved. Slowly, the crowd outside that studio began to form. The one online, typing reactions, clipping moments. Lemon adjusted in his chair, shifting posture, trying to regain footing. But under the lights, the dynamic had flipped. Every attempt to recover looked defensive now. Every interruption rang hollow. The anchor had lost command of his set. For Crockett, the receipts were more than fact checks. They were proof of dignity, proof that she didn't need to match arrogance with anger. All she needed was truth lined up, one after the other, until the arrogance looked small. By the time she closed her notes, the word junior was no longer an insult. It was a setup for the takedown. Crockett didn't thank him or ask for space. She just finished her point, sat upright and let the silence do the work. The cameras lingered. The image said it all. One figure unraveling, the other untouched, and as the segment cut to break, the energy in the room spilled outward. Clips would be posted within minutes. Hashtags would ignite within hours. Don Lemon still had the title of veteran anchor, but Jasmine Crockett had just delivered a moment built to live far longer. What happened inside that studio didn't stay there. By the time the program cut to commercial, someone had already clipped Crockett's calm reply and posted it online. Within minutes, short edits of the exchange spread across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Each clip replayed the word junior, then cut straight to her voice stacking receipts. The reaction was sharp and fast. Hashtags popped up: respect her work, junior receipts, and Jar Crockett vs Lemon. Users replayed the way she leaned back after presenting her evidence, noting the control in her silence. Others stitched the clip with their own reactions: surprise faces, cheers, even slow claps. For many, it wasn't about politics alone. It was about seeing someone refuse to be minimized. Commentators weighed in next. Some saw it as long overdue accountability for an anchor, with a reputation for arrogance. Others tried to defend Lemon, framing it as a poor choice of words, but the balance had already tilted. Crockett's composure became the story, not his. Defensiveness. Late-night shows circled the moment, joking about junior becoming the new shorthand for arrogance backfiring. Editorials surfaced quickly, highlighting how young progressives were reshaping debate styles by refusing to lean into rage. Instead, they showed that facts, calmly placed, drew louder applause than outbursts. The biggest ripple wasn't among pundits, though. It was among everyday viewers. Teachers, lawyers, nurses, service workers. Many shared the clip with captions like, "This is how you handle arrogance," or "Receipts always beat ego." Identity groups rallied around the imagery, pointing to Crockett as proof that preparation outweighs status. Even in Washington circles, whispers started. Staffers traded links. Colleagues nodded approval behind closed doors. The word was less about Lemon's stumble and more about Crockett stepping into a larger spotlight. That mattered, because in politics, narratives stick when they echo beyond the moment. Hers echoed. As engagement kept building, her response looked less like a debate point and more like a cultural snapshot. A screen grab of Lemon leaning back, visibly rattled, and Crockett sitting steady, notes in hand, trended on Twitter for hours. If arrogance had a face, people joked, it sat on his side of the split screen. If preparation had a look, it sat squarely on hers. By sunrise, it wasn't just viewers replaying clips. Journalists framed it as a shift in tone, a small but significant marker in how generational clout battles play out on national TV. Crockett had managed to take one single word, meant to reduce her, and instead turn it into the headline. When people look back on the exchange, the word junior fades. What lingers is how Jasmine Crockett handled it. No raised voice, no collapse into outrage, just facts delivered patiently, like a reminder that dignity outlasts cheap shots. The moral of the moment isn't only that one anchor stumbled, it's that arrogance always carries a crack, and the quiet voice of preparation can slip right through it. You don't need to meet disdain with more disdain. Sometimes the sharpest strike is calm truth presented without apology. For viewers at home, it offered something deeper than entertainment. Many knew that dynamic, the times they were belittled, told they hadn't earned their seat, urged to stay quiet. Crockett showed how to respond, not by shrinking and not by raging, but by standing rooted in proof of your worth. And that stayed with people, because her answer wasn't just about journalism or politics. It reached into everyday lives where dismissal still happens. The courtroom lessons carried outward. Let your receipts talk. Let composure be its own kind of volume. In the end, her presence reframed the fight. It wasn't a battle of fame versus obscurity. It was a reminder that respect isn't something granted by seniority. It's secured by showing strength wrapped in discipline. If politics often feels dominated by arrogance, moments like this prove something different can win. Crockett didn't change history that night, but she carved something meaningful into it. A track of resistance defined not by noise, but by clarity. That's what people will remember. Not the insult, not even the anchor's stumble, but the testimony of someone who turned belittlement into strength. That night exposed something bigger than a headline. Don Lemon's word was small, but it carried years of condescension. Jasmine Crockett answered it with the kind of composure that rewrites the frame. She didn't need to fight for the stage. She owned it the moment her receipt spoke for her. People will replay her response not because it was flashy, but because it was steady. A young lawmaker, often underestimated, reminded a country that preparation outweighs ego. That reminder doesn't fade quickly. If moments like this matter to you, if you want arrogance challenged with dignity, stick with us. Tap subscribe, hit like and share this story forward, because every clip passed on builds its own ripple. And in times like these, picking what we pass on matters almost as much as the moment itself.